page. If not, welcome for the first time. And hopefully there's a lot we can go through in the next hour and a half. I will try to leave lots of time at the end for questions and answers. But if you were here for our first session, Trina did a great job of introducing you just to the general concepts around online misinformation and disinformation and how these things are spread, the mistakes that media make in reporting them, and so on. So today we're going to start talking about what we can do to fight back, what we can do to protect ourselves in these kind of situations. And I'll go through some general points about understanding why people do this, understanding how they do it, and what kind of things we should be aware of. And I'll go into a couple of specific examples also. So it's really a starter and a taster on when you find this kind of information, when it comes your way, how to set about confirming or debunking online information. My name is Owen Sweeney. I've been working in this field specifically for just over 10 years. I spent 6 years with a news agency called Storyful, which specialized in finding, evaluating, and passing on online content to various news outlets around the world. I then spent some time with First Draft, who some of you may be aware of, who again specialize very closely in this field. My main thrust with First Draft was training. I then went independent a couple of years ago, and I focus almost entirely on training and education now. So let's have a look at what we've got for you today. So when we had our first session the other day, I set a little thought exercise for you, which it was probably pretty easy. I think most of you didn't really have any problems with it. I saw that some people had the right answers in the chat here before we even left session one. So I'm sure most people figured it out pretty quickly afterwards if they hadn't already done so. I pointed you toward this website, DHMO.org. The DHMO Research Division, and asked you whether the information on this website caused you to be concerned about DHMO. If so, why? If not, why not? And you will have seen that it is kind of similar to a lot of the kind of things we see out there, things that come across our social media, things that people forward to us, and possibly at first glance look like something we should be very concerned about. This one did make a few specific claims, but we'll go into those in a moment. But the first thing was, what was DHMO short for? And after you looked at it, you figured out, or you saw that it said dihydrogen monoxide. Again, sounds very scientific, sounds very chemical, and could this possibly be something hazardous? When you look a little bit closer at how they came up with the name dihydrogen monoxide, you would have seen that this comes from dihydrogen for 2 hydrogen molecules, or 2 hydrogen atoms, and 1 oxygen atom. For short, H2O, which I think most of us, if we weren't familiar with the term dihydrogen monoxide, we probably are familiar with the term H2O. If not, big surprise, that means water. So obviously this was making a big issue out of something that is an everyday substance that we can't live without, something that we have to have, and as long as we treat it with a little bit of respect, is entirely harmless to us. There were some specific claims made on the website, and when you look at them, you'll notice something about them. I asked you to determine whether they were true or false. Well, accidental inhalation of DHMO can cause death, which is, of course, true. This is known as what? Drowning. Gaseous DHMO can cause severe burns. True or false? Yes, again, it's true. We've probably all at some point, or most of us have had a steam burn when you're ironing or putting on a kettle or something. So again, that is true. DHMO is used by terrorist groups, including Al-Qaeda. True or false? Well, presumably true. I don't hang out with terrorist groups, but everybody uses water. Then DHMO is used in chemical weapons manufacture. True or false? Again, I'm not an expert in the manufacture of chemical weapons, but practically every major manufacturing industry uses water at some stage of production. So when you look at these, they look on the face of it like very dramatic and scary claims. Equally, they're all true. However, this is just an illustration that something can be true and at the same time can be misleading. And this website is a deliberate parody, but also an educational resource, because when you think carefully about what you see on the website, you will see that they're doing this in a way that mirrors a lot of the dis and misinformation you see out there. They're showing you some of the tactics that people use, telling you things that are factual, but putting them in such a way as to be misleading. And this is quite common. Very often it's not lies, it's not false statements, it's true, but the context and the framing matters. It's how these things are presented to you. So if you answered true to all of these, well done. Now, most of us probably will have reacted in this way, that nobody's going to fall for something like this. The ridiculous idea that H2O is this deadly, harmful substance that we should all be careful about. I think most of us and our peer groups would say, well, that's ridiculous. Nobody's going to believe it. Here's an actual news story from 2004. In California, a local council or city officials, it says here, were taken in by one of these H2O hoaxes, one of these dihydrogen monoxide hoaxes. And you can see the lead in this. It says, city officials were so concerned about the potentially dangerous properties of dihydrogen monoxide that they considered banning foam cups after they learned the chemical was used in their production. And it says nearly fall for H2O hoax. Some of the officials did actually fall for it because they were preparing to pass legislation to ban this deadly substance. There have been quite a few cases like this. I know at least of one other, a high school student in Idaho who passed around some information and did a survey asking people, here are the things that dihydrogen monoxide does. Do you think it should be banned? And in his particular sample, I'm not sure who exactly the people he asked were, but he got 86% of his responses were, yes, dihydrogen monoxide, otherwise known as H2O or water, should be banned. So don't underestimate how these things can build momentum and how people can start worrying about it. And you can see here the response then from the city manager. It's embarrassing. We had a paralegal who did bad research, and that age-old response of blaming somebody else for it. So where do we begin when we start getting this kind of information flooding toward us? This is obviously a big problem right now. We spoke the last day, Trina was talking about how, 10, 15 years ago, this kind of stuff was not coming into the public eye as regularly and in as large amounts as it is now. And this is a major issue because when I look at the 6 years I spent with the Storyful News Agency, the biggest shift we saw really over those 6 years was the amount of deliberately created fake and inauthentic content and information. When we started out, a lot of the time we were looking at things that were not produced with the intention to deceive or mislead. And as time went on, interested actors became very aware of and appreciative of the potential of this kind of thing to serve an agenda. So what happened was they started to put a lot of effort into deliberately misleading people. And this, of course, when you're in the business of passing on content and information to news outlets, this should make you stop and think, okay, we are at increased danger now of doing something terribly wrong here, because there are people out there whose mission is to deceive and to hoodwink us. So we did find ourselves dealing with a lot more deliberately fake and manipulative content and information. So where do we begin? Because obviously when there are major groups and organizations, sometimes up to state level, deciding that they're going to use information and content in this way, there's a bigger amount of it. It's better, if you want to use the term better, it's more skillfully applied, more skillfully created. So you have to get in the habit, get in the habit of evaluating quickly and trying to decide what potential there is for this to be false or misleading. So what will set off your internal alarm bells or red flags? What kind of things can you look at and decide, okay, Now I've got to pay closer attention to this. I really need to check whether this could be false. And this is an expression I use a lot, and I don't always get a great reaction to it, because I tell people, check your gut, check your initial instinctive, visceral reaction to it. And people say to me things like, well, that's not very scientific, is it? And yes, I'd be inclined to agree. It's not particularly scientific, but very often when you do get a gut reaction, your next reaction is to slow down and then check the thing. And very often you will find that your gut reaction was prompted by your experience or your expertise. So what you initially thought was just an instinctive reaction, you will realize that it was probably pretty much subconsciously being caused by something you knew from the past. So when you do find a post, a picture, a video, or a meme, or somebody sends one directly to you, you need to check your gut and ask yourself, how does it make you feel? Because very often this will be the first indication that something is amiss. And it will be your first reaction that makes you think, okay, I need to slow down and examine it further. There are a number of common, typical reactions when you see something like this. One of the very common ones, of course, is you see some piece of information and you think, oh, maybe I should buy that. And this is something, of course, that has become, it's exploded during the whole COVID pandemic. You know, promises of cures, or promises that if you get this, you will be guaranteed to be protected and to survive and to stay healthy despite the pandemic that's going around. And these kind of things, of course, if you're at all discerning about how you consume information, should be a very strong indication to you that somebody is trying to make money. Now, I'm not entirely opposed to the idea of making money. There's, business is business. But of course, when somebody is trying to make money, it's a potential distorting factor. It's something that will encourage people possibly to act in ways that are less than 100% ethical or even accurate. So if you think somebody is trying to make you buy something or part with your money, slow down, because you need to have a look and see, are they being absolutely honest about what they are telling you? And then this factor it's very closely related, because, when you see something and your initial reaction is, oh, I'm going to put a like on that, or I'm going to share this with my friends, with my family, with my Facebook contacts, or I'll subscribe to this channel. Again, that's something that should make you pause and think. And it's difficult because technology is something that has possibly made this worse, because it's so easy. A single click and you move on and forget you ever saw it, or even just a tap on your phone screen. So it's a lot easier than maybe it should be to share these things, or to put a like that will push it up in the algorithm somewhere and make it be shared with other people. So anytime you get this reaction, again, do I really want to encourage people to see this? Because what you will see very often is these dramatic stories that claim to be unreported. You'll always see something like, why is the mainstream media not covering this? Why is this being covered up? And, that's become ridiculous, because I've seen people at times saying, why is the mainstream media not covering this issue? And they're linking to a story from the Washington Post or the BBC. So that obviously there's something wrong there. But very often this kind of thing, it's an appeal to your emotions. Because when something is described as unreported or covered up, there's a feeling of something forbidden about it. And, we all know that when something is forbidden, it gains a little bit of glamour. It tugs on us a little bit. And we think, oh, I need to be in on this. So very often it's trying to play on those kind of emotions and encourage you to spread these things around. And it's very often trying to get more social media engagement, which, if somebody has a monetized online presence, a channel or an account that is getting money per click or per ad click through or things like that, this can be very valuable. So again, it does go back to the previous thing about somebody trying to sell something. What they may be selling is just their own persona, their own online presence, but it is part of the same direction, where somebody is trying to make money, and by doing this, they get more hits, more likes, they get pushed up in algorithms, and they get more money as a result. So again, money is the distorting factor here, and the thing that may be making somebody behave in a way that perhaps they shouldn't. When you see one of these things, a video, a photo, does it make you fear someone? Does it make you hate someone? Does it make you feel angry toward a particular religion or a particular social group or political party or anything like this? Because if it excites that kind of emotion in you, you have to think again, is this exactly what it was designed to do? So is somebody exploiting an atmosphere of crisis or emergency to try to create hostility toward minorities, toward different religious sects, toward a political party they don't like, or so on? Are they trying to manipulate you to further their own political or ideological agenda? So this is something that, again, it does play into quite strong emotional reactions. We all have fears. We all have the instinct for self-preservation and self-protection. And something that it's important to point out here is that people are not always sharing these things as an unhealthy reaction. Very often, it's coming from a good place. Because what do we want to do? We want to protect not only ourselves, but we want to protect those around us, our friends, our family. And sometimes when people see something like this, the reaction is not to think about it. The reaction is, I better quickly pass this on. And I better make sure that everyone knows about this, that this particular group are doing something bad. So maybe you should keep away from them. You should report them, and so on. So very often it's one of the most noble human reactions to protect those you love. But of course, fakers and propagandists and so on are playing on these emotions and using them to achieve a negative end. So again, anytime you feel this little jolt of insecurity or fear or anger, check yourself and say, is this exactly why this content or why this information is being spread around? Is somebody trying to make me feel that way? Because if they're committed and determined to make you feel that way, then of course, again, there is a distorting factor there, which is an agenda. And anywhere there's any kind of these distortions, you have to watch out for things not being what they claim to be. Something else not to underestimate is this kind of stuff. Do you find something funny? Do you find it shocking? And as a result, are you going to end up sharing it? This kind of feeds into all of the other stuff, because sometimes this will be done in order to get more clicks, to get more shares, and to make somebody's monetized online presence more lucrative. But sometimes people will just be doing it for pure mischief. And don't underestimate how many people out there like to do this kind of thing. It's not always the stereotypical teenage boy in his parents' basement trying to annoy everybody. There are lots of people who just get a kick out of tricking people, making people laugh, making people get angry, and so on. And I don't have any figures on this, but I would imagine they make up quite a large segment. we have the term trolls for people behaving in this kind of way. Trolls, of course, can be people who are trying to follow or set a specific agenda, but sometimes they're just doing it because they want to have a laugh at your expense. So try not to engage, try not to help these people out. Don't feed the trolls. So if you do get one of these gut reactions, one of these feelings, and you're feeling suspicious, what should you do then? Like, I keep saying stop and think about it. But of course, if you're somebody engaging in journalism, you don't have the option to stop, think about it, and then move on with your life. Because, and we will talk about this again another time, you have to evaluate whether this is something that you need to actually do something about. You know, if you just leave it and forget about it, are you leaving it for other people then to deal with? People who may not have the same journalistic training or the same critical faculties that you have. So are you failing in your duty to your public or your readership or your audience? So if you are suspicious about these things and you're a journalist, what do you do next? Well, the first thing always, and this is something I emphasize again and again to every group I ever do workshops with, that you don't always have to reinvent the wheel. You don't always have to start from absolute scratch. And I know people are overwhelmed by the amount of misinformation and disinformation that's out there. And the last thing we need to do when people are overwhelmed in that way is to be having them doing unnecessary work that has already been done by somebody else. So before you go off trying to analyze these things in tiny detail and trying to do all these very complicated tasks that you need, have a check and see if anybody else has already dealt with this piece of information or this piece of content. You all know how to use a search engine. So before you start doing these things, have a look around, see if it has been already mentioned somewhere else on social media or possibly even mass media. Very often we miss these things. We can't watch all the news all the time. But we do, of course, as I say, have search engines. So go and take a look and see if that thing you're about to go checking has already been checked. Here's just an example from South Africa. And it's claiming that the president is dancing, and refers to the expression Niobe boys, which we'll get into in a moment. And says, no wonder we are just a laughing stock by other countries. And of course, this now, you should be getting an instant gut instinct. You have a major political figure here who's being exposed to ridicule. And what's the obvious possibility there? Well, of course, it's that somebody has a political agenda. Somebody is trying to damage the image and the reputation of the president. And of course, that should make you suspicious. So you want to take a look into this a little bit further. So when I saw that some time back, excuse me, straight away I thought, well, it could be a fake. It didn't look all that good. So let's check just the guy's name and the term fake photo. Now, it's possible this would have brought me up nothing if it was actually a real photo or if nobody had dealt with it previously. But in this case, it was bingo, straight away. I hit the jackpot. And you can see a couple of things here. And one of them says immediately, no, fake photo does not show South Africa's President Cyril. And it goes down lower. You see it says claim South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa dancing like Niobe boys. So this, and you'll see here it says, checked by Africa Check. Africa Check are this really good organization. They check stuff across Africa. I've been to their HQ in Johannesburg in South Africa. They're really good people, really hardworking, very conscientious about how they go about their work. So I thought, this is great. Africa Check have dealt with this. That's going to probably be good enough for me. And when you click into that, you see the story here, and it says an image circulating on Facebook in South Africa claims to show the president dancing like Niobe boys. Niobe is a cheap and addictive designer drug unique to South Africa. So the president here is being held up to ridicule. It's claiming that he's dancing with this woman that like a drug addict. And of course, that doesn't reflect very well on him. But Africa Check have looked into this and have found that it's not, in fact, authentic. In their story, they point out that the original image came from Getty, and you can see it names the photographer, Roger Bosch, and it says, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa tests a bed that artisans make on the side of the road during a visit to an informal settlement on the outskirts of Cape Town. And of course, when you look at this original photo, the woman seen in the other one is no longer there, or wasn't there in the first place. So somebody has taken this photo, they've combined it with something else, they've manipulated it, and put it out with false, out of context information. So that's the debunk done there very quickly by Africa Check. Now, of course, as I've said, I know Africa Check. I know some of the people behind it. They're really good. And when you get this kind of information, don't immediately say, okay, somebody says it's fake, therefore I'm going to report that it's fake. Do evaluate that source and see, what kind of an organization or what kind of a person or outlet this is that's saying it's fake, and see how credible you find it to be. Here, for example, is Boom, a really good organization again in India that I've done some work with. I find them really thorough, really conscientious about the way they go about things. And if you look at Boom here, you can see, first of all, they are a signatory to the International Fact-Checking Network. And in order to get that and to get this badge on your site, you do have to meet certain quite strict and detailed criteria. So that's always a good sign for starters. You'll see here also, they also have contact details available on their page. So if you did have some niggling doubt about their story, you could reach out and contact them. They also have a very detailed about page, which I find really good again, because it explains the methodology that they use when they go about analyzing or evaluating content and information. It also profiles a lot of their staff members. It explains their background, their professional expertise, and so on. So you can be very confident about this source, because you can see that they do a lot of work to make sure that they do this kind of stuff in as credible a manner as possible. So if you see Boom saying that's a fake, then there's probably a very good chance that it is a fake. If your source, by contrast, is something like this, and they say that's a fake, you should probably look a little bit further. And we've all seen these kind of contents out there giving all these kind of weird things, and they're saying that's fake, that's true, that's something else. But I definitely would not stop at these and take their word as being accurate or true. So again, it's about looking for somebody already having done the evaluation, and then also evaluating who they are, how good they are at what they do, what kind of a track record they have, and therefore how credible their judgment is. Now, even if they look like the best people in the world, even if it's Boom or it's Africa Check or it's AFP or BBC or whoever, don't just immediately and instinctively say, okay, read their headline where they say this is fake, and then go off and report that yourself, because anyone can make a mistake. Even the best people out there can make mistakes. I've seen some really good news organizations and fact-checking organizations get things slightly wrong from time to time. So do look at the process that they went through and look at the conclusions that they have come to as a result, and ask yourself whether these make sense. Again, Boom, as I say, is very transparent. They explain to you exactly why they came to the conclusion that something was fake or real. So when you look at their fact checks, you can check this little by little yourself, go through it line by line and say, yes, they did this, and they did this. And when you add these things up, their conclusions look very sound and very solid. So don't just take it from the headline or the headline and the first sentence. Look through and see what they have done, as well as reassuring yourself that they have been thorough about it and conscientious. You also may learn something. I've been doing this kind of work for more than 10 years. I've worked with some of these organizations. I've trained some of their staff. And yes, because they're doing this on a very busy basis day to day, I learn things from them all the time, because they will see something new that I've never anticipated, and they will find a way of debunking or confirming it. So it's always good to look at these fact-checking organizations and verification organizations that have a lot of experience in the field, because they will do several of these a day. There could be something unique happening every week, and they may have had to come up with a different way of checking it. So it's good to follow a few of them, check how they're going about their work, and see if there's something you could add to your own arsenal in this way. Now, if all this thing that I've just said to you about Googling it and finding somebody else having debunked it, if this all falls flat and you can't find anybody else having checked it, this is where we need to move on. Or if, as I say at the bottom of the slide here, if you don't fully trust what you have found because you saw their judgment, but you think something may be missing, they may have got something slightly wrong or explained it inadequately, this is where you need to stand on your own feet and carry out your own checks. Now, what kind of checks can we carry out? The answer is almost endless because, one piece of disinformation or misinformation will never be the same as another one. There will be certain common themes, there will be certain common tactics, but they will often be different. But having said that, there are two main things that you need to check, and check very carefully. First of all, there is the source. Where is this information coming from? Now, this is something that, unfortunately, technology has worked against us in this regard, because compared to when I started doing this stuff 10 or so years ago, it's a lot more difficult to get back to the original source now. And there are numerous reasons why this is, but the biggest reason, of course, is the rise of private messaging apps. When we started doing this kind of work, very often you just had to search quickly through social media, and you could find the earliest version of a video or a photograph or a complex post about some issue. And you could say, okay, that's the source of it. This is the person who started it. Of course, then the whole thing of closed, like message boards and stuff, started to be used a lot more for creating and disseminating this stuff. And then, of course, we get to WhatsApp, Line, Telegram, KakaoTalk, all of these things, where we can't see who is sharing things. And by the time they appear on public-facing social media, they may have bounced around all over these messaging apps. And there may be absolutely no breadcrumb trail back to the original copy. So this, unfortunately, as I say, has made it a lot more difficult. And it does mean we have to be a bit more flexible and a bit more imaginative about how we try to track down originals. There's no straight line back to them on many occasions now. You also need to check the content itself. And we will go into a lot of things, not just today, but in our subsequent sessions, about how you go about doing this. Because the content, of course, visual content is a hugely powerful form of information and a hugely powerful form, therefore, of mis and disinformation. So being able to query the content itself, regardless of where it has actually originated from, is very important, because it can be very dissatisfying and frustrating not to be able to track down the original source. But even without the original source, you can still check content and come to some pretty strong conclusions. Because if something is being presented out of context, or if something has been manipulated, and you find that this is the case, well, then it's largely irrelevant where it originated from, unless you are trying to track disinformation networks. If something is false, it's false, regardless of its origin. So when you look at a source, what are you actually looking for? Well, you have to evaluate these sources, first of all, for authenticity. Because if this is a fake persona, if this is misrepresented, if it's somebody claiming to be somebody that they are not, then of course you have to treat all of their content, all of their information with deep suspicion. Anyone who is out there trying to tell you that they're Elon Musk or that they're Barack Obama or whoever else, when they're clearly not, you can't believe anything they say. You can't. I'm not saying everything that they say is false, but you have to suspect everything. So first of all, is this person who they claim to be? Are they indeed a real person at all? Who knows? Well, you have to go through a lot of things to try to figure this out. The next thing is location. Because if somebody is posting, say, a video or a photograph, and they say, look what just happened in, let's say, Jakarta, and you figure out that this person is very unlikely to actually be in Jakarta, well, then either they're passing on somebody else's content, or they're making things up and describing them out of context. So trying to see where somebody is located can very often be helpful. If you have somebody who's posted a whole lot of stuff about London, but they're quite obviously seem to be in Osaka, again, why are they doing that? Have they some specific reasons for this? Have they an agenda? And so on. It can also be helpful to look into these people and see what is their expertise, what is their background knowledge. The thing that they're claiming to have witnessed, or the thing that they're claiming has happened, have they any relevant knowledge to this? And this is something, of course, that over the past year or so during the pandemic has become huge, because you're constantly getting people making claims about what will help you to recover from COVID, what will protect you against COVID, why vaccines are bad, or something like this. And you look at these people and you realize that they have absolutely no scientific expertise, they have no medical background. Why should we be listening to what they say? So it can be very helpful to see, if somebody is claiming that your immune system can't work with these vaccines, and you see that they're a baker or a bus driver or whatever, you have to question, why should I be listening to this person? Why should anybody be listening to this person? And then also, by looking into somebody and looking at their background and their identity and so on, it can definitely help you to figure out whether somebody has a specific agenda or a specific motivation. And if you find that somebody has such an agenda or motivation, they're very strongly, constantly pushing, for example, the interests of a political party or the interests of an ethnic group or a religious sect or so on, well, then again, strong motivation, strong agenda, that is again a potential distorting factor. So if you can discern and identify such a monomania on a particular topic, well, then of course you have to be suspicious about this person's purposes. Then we look at the source. There are a number of techniques that it's important to be able to use and use well. The most relevant ones when you're starting out looking at a piece of content, very often these are entirely adequate without going into anything more complex or detailed. And this is something that I will constantly go back and harp on, that sometimes people say to me, okay, I've learned the basics. Now tell me the interesting stuff. Tell me the advanced stuff. And very often I will say to them, 99% of what you encounter in your job, you will be able to confirm or debunk using the simplest of techniques. Very often it's a very small subset of the skills, and it is about how you apply them. I'm thinking about people I know who've been doing amazing work in this field. A former colleague of mine, Malachi Brown, who runs the visual investigations team at the New York Times, we've talked about this quite often, and he will say, yes, of course, they have a lot of amazing abilities and techniques that they use, but very often, again, it is this small subset that they start with every time, and that will take them very far. We're not all going to go out and win a Pulitzer Prize like they have, but we can do a very sufficient and adequate job without ever getting into anything highly technical or specific. So the ones I would look at, and we're going to look at a lot over the next couple of weeks, source analysis, first of all. And I've already talked about, going back and trying to figure out as much as you can about the source. Then there's a technique which has become known as a social audit, which sounds a little bit suspicious because it involves looking at a lot of somebody's presence online, and it's something that you have to keep very strict ethical boundaries in mind for. We will be doing an entire session on ethics later, but it's very important when you are looking into a person in an extensive and comprehensive way online, you have to keep ethics to the forefront of your thinking all the time. And then something that has become ever more important is corroborating and comparing content and different versions of the same claim, different descriptions of the same incident, and so on, because it does help when you can't get back to the original source. That are two people describing the same thing as having happened in the same place? Or are there big clashes in the way they describe it? Are there big contrasts in two pieces of video from a similar location or incident? So being able to compare things and being able to find more than a single source. This is something, of course, that goes back to the heart of what we learn originally as journalists, that you cannot take as authentic information that you're getting from a single source. Trina mentioned the other day the thing about the Twitter account that turned out not to be even belonging to a real person, and it was quoted by major media all over the world. So do try to get at least a second source as often as you can. Now, when you're looking at content, there are a number of things that you need to check out. And manipulation, of course, is a complete no-no, and it's something that if we see that content has been manipulated, we have to then discount it or maybe go on a bit further and try to figure out why it was manipulated. But there's a lot of panic these days about deep fakes and about completely fake content. And it's not missing the point, but it is concentrating a little bit too much on what's a small set, again, of the kind of stuff that's out there. Because more often than that, what you're finding is content that has been misrepresented or presented out of context. Something that is actually real, but is being described in a misleading way or presented in a misleading way. So it can be important to check whether the content you're looking at exists elsewhere. Can you find another copy of it? Can you find another version of it that is presented in a different context, that is described in a different way? Then specifics. Can you confirm the location? Because if you're told that you're looking at, for example, a bomb dropping on Gaza, and then you find out that this was actually shot in Yemen or Iraq or somewhere else, well, then, of course, you can say that the person who posted that is providing something that's false, and you can look into the reasons for doing so. Maybe it was entirely inadvertent. Maybe they weren't trying to mislead, but that kind of thing can be helpful. Then we'll talk also about looking into dates and times, because one thing that's quite common when people are trying to mislead is the recycling of older content. So photos and videos that were shot of a similar incident, but at an earlier date, are very often recycled and reproduced and put out there to buttress somebody's argument or to mislead people. So with content, when we're looking into it, the most relevant techniques, the one I say everybody should be able to do, not just journalists, but every member of the public, is reverse image search, because I still think that this would wipe out an awful lot of the confusion and disinformation out there if everybody was able to instantly reverse search every image that comes across their path. Then image analysis, looking for fakes, looking for manipulation. As I said already, corroboration and comparison is very important to be able to do. Geolocation is the term that's used to look at something and visually confirm whether it is in a certain location or indeed somewhere else. And then date and time analysis, which it's a lot more difficult than geolocation. It's not as reliable. Very often the best you can get is a suggestion, but it can be very helpful. Just a quick mention of reverse image search. If some of you were involved in our early exercises here, the ones we did in phase 1 of this session or this project, you will have done a short video about reverse image search, and you'll be familiar with this picture that's here. This was one that was published not just by this Italian news channel, but was put out elsewhere also, where this gentleman was described as being the presumed suicide bomber responsible for attacks in Paris. And this was based on a Twitter account that had put it out there, praising him for carrying out the attack and showing him wearing an explosive belt or vest and holding up a copy of the Quran. And as you can see, this news outlet put it out on their Twitter account, and they also carried it on their TV news. They're not the only ones. It did appear elsewhere also. And then, of course, when you did a reverse image search on this image, you found the original, which was this guy. He was a tech journalist from Canada named Virendra Jubal, who had got a new iPad and had taken a selfie with it in his bathroom mirror. And one of my sharper journalists some time back pointed out, when they saw the manipulated one, they said, "Does the copy of the Quran have a camera built in?" So it's something I hadn't even thought of when I looked at the original photo. I just went through reverse image search, and there he was with the iPad, which obviously then was used to take the photograph. So reverse image search is something that it takes seconds to learn how to do it, or it takes maybe minutes to learn how to do it. It takes seconds to actually carry out reverse image searches. And very, very often it will instantly tell you that something is fake. Now, the thing I encourage people to use a lot is the fake news debunker. It's a browser extension from a group called Invid. One of the reasons I recommend this one, there are many tools that you can use. One of the reasons I recommend this one is because it was created using public money in Europe. So it has had to uphold very strict standards around privacy, around security, and it also gives you multiple chances to look using different reverse image search platforms. But it is one of these that when if you add this to your browser, you're not going to have to worry that it may be installing malware or backdoors or anything in your browser, because it is it has to be responsible about how it does these things. It is available for both Chrome and Firefox. So once you have that installed in your browser, you go to an image and you can simply right click on the image. Now, in this case, we have this picture of a couple of sharks swimming around in a shopping mall at the bottom of an escalator. Sorry, it says Kuwait Scientific Center. So not a shopping mall in this case, but I have seen these same sharks swimming in shopping malls, in subway stations, one of them going along a highway in Texas, and so on. They're very well-traveled sharks. But as we will see, as we have seen, it's fake. It's not an actual real representation of what happened. This shark was originally taken, his photo was taken in the ocean in South Africa, and then it gets manipulated and copied into other images around the world. So with this, you simply right-click on the image, and you'll see here it says Fake News Debunker by GNI Verify. I'm not sure which trade name they have settled on now, or which identifying name they've settled on. But you'll see here that you can reverse image search using Google. You can do it using Yandex, which is also very powerful, very helpful. You can use Microsoft's Bing, which is improving all the time. And then you can see a couple of more specific ones. You have Baidu there. For example, if the image originated in China, that can often find things that Google or Yandex may not. Or you can click on Image Reverse Search All. There are mentions of a couple of other functions of InVid there. We'll go into those at a later time. So you just choose one and you reverse search it. In this case, you'll find out that this picture has appeared over and over again and has been repurposed and changed and used to try to trick people in all kinds of situations. The question I get asked so often when we do reverse image search, and people are very happy that they've been able to reverse image search, and I always get asked, how about reverse video search? And the bad news is that there is no direct equivalent of reverse image search for video. There is, however, a kind of a workaround, or there are ways in trying to do something similar. And you'll see here, this is a still from a video, and it's described as crowd topple 5G mast due to COVID-19 health fears. Know the dangers, spread the word. And it shows some people with a couple of cables tied around a mast. And if you actually watch the video, you'll see them pull it down. And it all looks very scary. And you're thinking, well, have these people got a point? Why are they so scared of 5G related COVID that they will actually go out and pull down masts? Now, there are people doing stuff like that, but was that the case in this situation? So by going to the InVid plugin, now when you have this installed in your browser, you will see a little icon up on the top right, and you click on that to open InVid. Then you just go to it, and in this case, it's a YouTube video, and you put in the YouTube URL from the address bar, and you hit submit. And you can see down below here that there are a number of thumbnails or frames. And what this has done is, any of you who have uploaded video to YouTube will know that you're always asked, what do you want to use as a thumbnail? And of course, you can set a custom thumbnail, but most people don't. They choose one of the ones that YouTube has suggested to them. So what this does is, it goes to the address of that video, and it extracts what the options were for the person to use as a thumbnail. So when you look at these, you see the last two there are very generic. It's very unlikely they're going to be helpful. They're just a piece of pavement and a few feet, and there's nothing really that stands out. But the first few, particularly the first one that comes up there, looks very promising. We can see that it's got strong shapes, it's got strong contrasts, it's got strong colors, and these are the kind of things that are helpful to reverse image search, that it makes it more likely that reverse image search will find a match for them. So what you're doing is you're doing reverse image search on a still from a video. And all going well, you should be able to find other copies of this video if they're online. In this case, Yandex was the one that worked out best for me. There's no hard and fast rule as to which one is better. In this case, it happened to be Yandex. And you can see on the top left again, that's the same, or at least a very similar light post or whatever kind of post it is. You could click into one of those. But there's also something down the bottom. It links to a story that has this thumbnail in it also. It says video news, videos against Hong Kong protesters' facial recognition system. And says demonstrations continue in Hong Kong, which states that the law on extraditions to China is against the autonomy of the region. So straight away, you look at that and you don't see any mentions of 5G, any mentions of COVID. So that may be worth investigating. So when you click into that, you come to this. Now, I don't read or speak Chinese, but still, I've got something here that I can work with. So it definitely appears to be a still from the same video. You can see several people dressed in the same way, carrying things, wearing things, excuse me. And you can see the post and the trees in the background. And it's almost certainly from the same video. When you click on the address of that video, it takes you here. And you start this video, that's the first frame, but as you watch and you go through, you will find that that clip that was produced by whoever was spreading the 5G COVID information comes up later in the video, and you can see it's exactly the same. So this is the incident that is being portrayed in the video, claiming they're tearing down a 5G mast to avoid getting COVID. Is that the truth? Is that what happened? Is that why people are pulling down this mast? Now, in this case, as I said, I don't speak Chinese, but Google Translate to the rescue. I know sometimes if I'm in a, excuse me, a seminar or a conference, I know if there are translators in the audience, because as soon as you mention translate software, they go, oh no. But the point is that we're not using translation software like this to write novels or to create poetry. We're just using it to try to dig out information. And with many language pairings, it's very adequate. It does the job we need to do. And you can see here it says in English, 824 Kwantong Parade, demonstrators destroy and pull down smart lampposts. Now, initially I was looking at this and I thought, what on earth are smart lampposts? And again, no mention of COVID, no mention of 5G. But I decided to use some of this information and try searching just by myself in English. And I put down Kwantong. Excuse me if that pronunciation is completely wrong, but smart lampposts. And straight away, you'll see a story from the South China Morning Post. You'll see them mentioned in what's actually an official government website. Secondly, there's a fact check from AFP. Again, very good source, and so on. So I think now I'm heading in the right direction. And you see on some of them, it says, many Hong Kongers fear this new technology. Now, it doesn't say anything about fearing 5G. It doesn't say anything about fearing COVID. So after this, you go into one of these stories, and it says, Hong Kong protests, what are smart lampposts and what impact could they have on privacy? So this is obviously a privacy issue, not a COVID issue or a 5G issue. And it says many Hong Kongers fear that it could be used for surveillance purposes. You go and look at the story, and it says violence broke out in Kowloon Bay on Saturday. And when you look at this, the Saturday corresponds with the date shown in that news video of the people attacking the post. And it says protesters destroyed the lampposts, police used tear gas on the crowd, and so on. Why are people upset over these lampposts? So again, is it because they're contain 5G and it's because they're going to give them COVID? So you go down to a paragraph on that. It says, some people believe the lampposts are surveillance tools as they are fitted with sensors, closed circuit cameras, and data networks. They fear they could contain high-tech cameras and facial recognition software used for surveillance by the Chinese government. Now, at this stage, I imagine you've got the message. This video had nothing to do with people trying to prevent themselves getting COVID because of 5G being used. So I'm going to, before we go into question and answers, I'm going to give you a look at a couple of things here. And you can take these away with you. And before our next session, try to figure out whether they are authentic or not. So it's a little true or false quiz, and we've got 3 of them. And you can use various different techniques looking into these and figure out what you think about them. So the first one is about American basketball star LeBron James. And it's a story, you can see there, it's CBS News, MLB, Major League Baseball. And the story is LeBron James is going to become a star player for the Boston Red Sox baseball team. And he's saying, I'm going to do what Michael Jordan couldn't. Now, even if, like me, you're not a huge basketball fan, you probably know who LeBron James is and who Michael Jordan is. Michael Jordan did try to launch a baseball career at some point, and he failed. And now it appears from this story that LeBron James is going to join the Boston Red Sox with the aim of being a huge baseball star. So there is a link there. Go to that link and then try to figure out for yourself whether what you see here is true or false. The second one, and there's been a lot of stuff in the news recently, a lot of it from the United States, talking about UFOs. And this is a tweet that appears to be on the account of the International Space Station. You can see it's got the blue verification tick there. And it seems to be tweeting about some kind of a UFO sighting. It says the object at lower left, and you can see a little bright object there at the lower left, just above the horizon, was moving at high speed in a clearly controlled manner. Extraterrestrial visitors coming to play, and hashtag the truth is out there. So is this something that we should be taking seriously? If the people in the International Space Station, who are very highly qualified and experienced astronauts and scientists, if they're tweeting about stuff like this, is it something we should be worried about or that we should be taking seriously? So again, go to the link, have a look at it, and do a little bit of work and figure out if you think this is true or false. Number 3 is Kim Kardashian. I know there's a very American angle to all these. I'm not American myself, but there just tends to be a huge amount of information out there coming from America. And it says Kim Kardashian got involved in the war between Azerbaijan and Armenia. And you may remember that there were a lot of armed clashes late last year between these two countries. And for some reason, very famous reality TV star, big celebrity, seems to be getting in the middle of this war. And it says Kim Kardashian calls on US to urge Turkey to stop sending arms and fighters to Azerbaijan. It seems like something very serious and grave for the person described at the start of the story as celebrity and businesswoman Kim Kardashian West. Called on the United States to warn Turkey to stop sending arms and fighters to Azerbaijan. Why would Kim Kardashian be doing something like this? It's not usually the kind of thing that she's involved with. So again, we have a link to the image there. Go have a look at it, do whatever checks you can, and tell us whether you think this is true or false, and why so. So we're just coming up to an hour here. I said I wanted to leave lots of time for questions and answers. Now, just before that, we do have a tip sheet for you. Trina mentioned this the last day if you weren't here, and you'll see that you can go to the tip sheet using this link or the QR code. And there was a condition that you can get the tip sheet by filling in the feedback at the link. So we'd really appreciate any feedback you have about things you liked, things you think maybe could have been better explained, or some things maybe that weren't mentioned and you would love to see them brought up. And please, give us your feedback. As it says here that, you have also addresses here for people you can contact. You can contact the organizers of these workshops directly, or you can contact me directly also. And it has my email and also my personal Twitter account. If you go to my Twitter, you can direct message me. Very often it's the easiest way to contact me. The direct messaging function is open, so you don't have to have me following you. You can just send me a direct message, and don't hesitate to contact me if there is something you're wondering about or questions you have, because I very much enjoy talking about this, about this field. I do get snowed under from time to time, but I will do my best to get back to you with the best answers I possibly can if you do contact me. You'll see that in the messaging and in the what do you call this? The comment section on the right. Trina has put in links for the exercise images. Sorry, my brain is trying to do too many things at once here. And if you were looking at this as a recording and you weren't here for the live session, and thus you didn't get a chance to ask any questions in the question and answers at the end, don't worry, because we have clinic hours that myself and Trina will be hosting. And we have 2 of them, one on July 1st and one on July 5th. So if one of those is convenient to you, please join at that time. And again, in the comments section, Trina has provided the link for registration. So think about it. Very often, even if you were here for the live session, sometimes people go away later and a question occurs to them and they think, oh, I forgot to ask this, or I should have asked this. So please, if you've missed out on asking something and it occurs to you tomorrow or next week, do come back for the clinic hour and have a question ready, and we will do our absolute best to answer it for you. So with all that in mind, I'm still going to be here for as long as you need me now to ask questions you may have about the session we've just done. So please fire ahead. I'm never sure when there are no questions, whether that means people are satisfied or completely confused. So don't be shy.
Hi there, Owen. So we can give, because it's already past the 1 hour limit, so maybe we can give another minute for questions to stream in. If there are no questions within the minute, then we will just end the broadcast. Yeah, so if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask. If it's not clear, or maybe it's overly clear, but you have other things that popped up in your mind, just key in the comment section and we'll try to get Owen to answer it as soon as possible. Got another 30 seconds to go. So yeah, just feel free to ask.
And again, as I say, if a question occurs to you later and you didn't have time to ask it now, please reach out and get in touch.
All right, it looks like no one is asking any questions. So and if that will end the session today, and we will see you again next week, Monday, same time, 6 p.m. Hong Kong, and also 6 p.m. Singapore time. So we'll be running the 3rd session on next Monday. The 4th session will be on next Wednesday, same time, 6 p.m. Hong Kong time. So with that, thank you, everyone. We'll see you again next week. Have a good weekend. Bye.
Thank you very much.